what's next for Clemson's recruiting class? We've talked about recruiting all off season because we love it so much, but what's next? We've seen what Clemson can do. They recently landed 5-star defensive tackle Peter Woods from Alabama. Big pickup. One of the best players in the country. Not only that, just 8 minutes from Pelham, Alabama, where where Dabo Swinney is from. So the question is now, and Al just disappeared on us, but the question is now, Houston, what do they do next? Is there a little bit of a lull now? Is there a little bit of, kind of a calm? Because they've got 17 commits now, Houston. They now have to go into, we're halfway through July. August is fall camp. The end of July is Dabo Swinney's all-in cookout. So there could be some recruiting news there in the next couple of weeks. But then there's fall camp, which is a lot of effort on the coaches. They have to then turn to the team that's right there in front of them, the 2022 team. And then they host players as official visits throughout the season. But there are some holes still yet to fill. Houston, I'll start with you. We'll throw Al because he's back in. But start with you. What's the biggest hole to fill in your opinion?
Well, I think now that they've been able to make up for majority of for the defensive and offensive line, I think the priorities now shift to more of the skill positions and the back end of the defense. I would say if you had to put a ranking to it, 1A, 1B would be running back and wide receiver, but some of those may not have resolution until later in the fall. And I think people need to understand that some of these positions will take some time. But Ronan Hannafin has potential to commit to Clemson. I think the amount of wide receivers that Notre Dame is taking in this class has given them a little bit of pause just because, they took like 5 or 6 or even 7 last year, and they're taking another 3 to 4 this year. So not to say that he's not for competition, but I think there's an opportunity for him to play a little faster, potentially at Clemson if he were to come here. So that's something that could be a feather in the cap. Running back, we'll talk more about that. But I think from there, it's just kind of pick your poison. Obviously, there's some candidates out there like Hunter Osborne that's still out there for defensive line. But I would say running back and wide receiver are 1A, 1B.
Al, we're going to be talking about a few players that I meant that Houston just mentioned, that I mentioned that we're going to look at their highlight film. But is there any one position for you that sticks out that they have to nail down?
Yeah, I agree a lot with what Houston said. I'll tell you this: I would go lean more towards receiver, and mainly because I'm just kind of the school of thought that running backs are a dime a dozen for the most part, and I just feel like that we can find one late in the process. Whether he might not be up to Travis Etienne standard or something like that, but I think they're going to be solid enough that you can go out and win with. So I think we can do that. I think we got to find a receiver. I think it's an awful thing we weren't able to hang on to Ray Joseph. I think he's going to be a huge playmaker, and that was a tough one to lose. I wish we could find somebody else like that, a slot receiver with some speed, who could play in there and create some mismatches and get in open space. But yeah, I would say wide receiver is number 1 for me. Running back is definitely number 2.
I think everybody's kind of interested to see what's going to happen at running back. They went out, and I talked about this in a recent text message between you guys. They went out and they started with Richard Young and Justice Haynes. They basically offered 2 around the same time, and they, from my understanding, told both of them, "Hey, whoever decides to commit, it's yours. We're going to offer both of you, but we can only take one, and we love you both." But you're our first ones, and you've shown interest. You've come on unofficials, and you've come to junior day. And Justice Haynes was coming to baseball games. He was actually entertaining Clemson pretty well, I think. Now, he is a Georgia legacy. His dad played at Georgia. Richard Young, looking back, seems to be leaning towards Alabama and always was. But hey, you have to go for your shot, 5-star guy, right? If you only got one to take, my opinion is you got to go for the stars, right? Even if it may be a long shot. Now, once those 2 gentlemen, and the way Clemson does recruiting, Houston and we've talked about it many times, but they're very transparent about their goals, and they want the player in return to be transparent about their feelings, their leaning. And so Richard Young, Justice Haynes, early on this year, ended up saying, "Hey, you know what? We're gonna take official visits elsewhere. We're not gonna probably come back to Clemson for official visits." So those two out of the mix. Then around February, Cedric Baxter, who had came in for a camp in 2021, gets offered. So there was a little bit of a relationship there. He had shown interest by coming to camp. Cedric Baxter was offered, but I believe, and this is just me speculating, you don't really just offer somebody without trying to say, "Hey, I'm going to offer you, but you also need to return the favor and come visit us, come see us." Well, they gave him February, they gave him March, they gave him April, and they gave him through May, and he still had not come to Clemson. And so, to my understanding, at that time in May, they moved on to Jeremiah Cobb, who was the guy who said, "Hey, if you offer me, I'm coming on an official visit." And they offered him, and he came on an official visit. He came in early June and saw the university. Now, a lot of people say, well, he was always an Auburn lean. But again, it goes back to, you're one of the best teams in the country. You got to shoot your shot, man. You got to go for it. And even though he was already leaning to Auburn, Clemson gave their best effort, and he's still committed to Auburn. But I feel like, it makes sense, the players that are on the board right now. And then now they have Christopher Johnson, who is going to be a difficult one as well. He is basically a speedy track guy, one of the fastest guys I've seen in Florida. Won his division in the state championships at the 100 meter and the 200 meter. So he's blazing fast. But with that comes also the caveat that he and his family love and are around Miami. So you're fighting Miami there, who has a lot of momentum with Mario Cristobal right now. It's never going to be easy, but you got to take your shots with the best available. You say it in NFL. Sometimes you want to take the best available on the draft board, right? But then a lot of fans, I think, use it as a negative towards Clemson. I don't really understand it. Like, we need to offer 15 more people. Well, first of all, that's not the philosophy. And second of all, you're going to take the best available, and you're also going to continue for your philosophy of being transparent and saying, "Hey, this is what we're going after. You have your slot. I'm going to give you your opportunity." Now, that transparency is returned and reciprocated. Now, sometimes, Houston, you and I know, Alan, you and I know, that you don't hear back from the player until it's like, December. Well, that's a long time to wait for a fan. It's not fun for us. I'm sure it's a little bit nerve-wracking for a coach as well, but that's the way that they run recruiting. So right now, Christopher Johnson is number one on the board. Now, there'll be other ones after him that they are talking to. It would be ridiculous if they weren't. But I agree with Al. I think running back is super important because you have a little bit of a gap. You didn't pick up your second player last year. If you don't pick up a player this year, there's a little bit of a gap, but you fill it in with your walk-on from Dominique Thomas. So I like Dominique Thomas a lot. I've been promoting him a lot. I would like to see them take at least one this class, running back. And then I would like to see them, really you could shoot for the stars again in 2024, 2025. I don't think it's going to be that bad. But what's next for me? I've got on the board running back and wide receiver. Obviously, you also have Hunter Osborne, who is a defensive end. So do you guys see anybody else? I mean, I know that there is talk about another player in the secondary. Who do you guys see that's like top of the board on the secondary? Houston, I'll start with you.
Realistically, probably Robert Billings. I know there's been scuttlebutt for some other names for corner and for safety that haven't really been offered yet. So I don't want to project what's going to happen there. Clemson has a pretty patented approach that there's going to be a list of names probably pop up either at the end of the summer or during the season where you're like, who is this kid? Oh, he turns out to be pretty good. Oh, he turns out to be an All-American. That's kind of what's happened. They've done that several classes now with guys that have turned out in several different positions. So I would say if there is someone on the board in the secondary, Robert Billings is probably that guy, but also just be aware, like there's going to be some more guys get offered.
Al, if you had to, do you think that they'll go after a third cornerback?
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I think Houston was, or the name we're talking about defensive back, and Houston brought up Robert Billings. I think he's the one you hear most about when it comes to defensive backfield. You'll hear about Damari Brown and some guys like that, little, higher tier guys, but will probably end up going elsewhere. And I think those are the kind of guys we're looking at right now, at least to fill those positions. I don't know if you're going to get into the other potential openings we have, but I still think. You could potentially take a tackle if a speed rush end were to come available. I think you go after him. I still think you're looking for an offensive tackle. There are several positions out there where we could still recruit, and of course, we've already talked about receiver and running back as well. So there's definitely still people out there that Clemson's going to be communicating with and keeping those irons in the fire just in case something opens up later on in the cycle with attrition or due to whatever transfer or whatever. So there's going to be several that we can still hopefully reel in. Goodness gracious, you can never have enough on either of the lines, is what we talk about here a lot. We've already recruited so unbelievably on the defensive line right now. And to be honest with you, I'm good with, except for we need one more defensive end right now. I'm good with everybody else. I don't care if we get any more. To me, it's just icing on the cake right now. I would like a more pure speed pass rush type of guy. But honestly, that guy was Keldrick Falk to me, and he went to Florida State. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see if there's any new names pop up or anything that comes down the pipe. But Houston talked about it with defensive back especially. There's always these names that nobody's heard of that kind of come on strong at the end of the cycle that Clemson offers, especially at corner and safety. It seems to happen a lot, and it's happened over the last several years. I'm hoping the same thing can happen at end.
Names you might want to look at. Christopher Johnson, we did a video on him. Tyler Williams, we're going to talk about tonight. Ronan Hannafin, Stanton Rammel, as Alan said, Hunter Osborne, Damari Brown, and then again, Robert Billings. So a lot of those names out there that we've mentioned, go check them out and see what you think in there as well. Let's get in the chat, fellas, and let's see what everybody has to say before we move on to our next topic. That was a quick check-in with our where Clemson is recruiting-wise so far, heading into mid-July into early August. So let's look at the chat real quick. Corporal Husk gets in, says, I think we are in decent shape with Hannafin. And if the new slot wide receiver RJ Baker name just popped up, if he runs a 4.3, that's a nice slot prospect under the radar as well. So RJ Baker is one maybe if you're a recruiting fan, go check out as well. Obviously 4.3 is really fast, and that would be great for any kind of slot receiver. Timothy on YouTube gets in and says Damari Brown at cornerback, Robert Billings at safety. Sarian says for sure Clemson takes their best shot. Problem is sometimes it's way too late. It works when the recruit has always had Clemson near the top. Really tough when they haven't. Yeah, if you're having to make up a lot of lost ground, I think we all can agree with that. You don't want to be in that position. I think to John and I would both agree, you don't want to be in that position, and that's why it's so important for your position coach to have, have a really good understanding before they even make the offer. Because of the way Clemson does the philosophy, you start throwing out offers and it's a long shot. Yeah, you take your shot, but sometimes you gotta say, hey, is this really worth it? I don't know. Sometimes it may be, sometimes it may not. But like I said, I think too late. It goes back to the fact that maybe there really wasn't a good relationship being built anyways, which Clemson tries to avoid that situation. Joey says Mario will make a splash at Miami. They will be real competition. Now, Houston, they're 7th overall in the nation right now. Is that shocking to you?
No. Look, they've always recruited well. They recruited well under Randy Shannon. They've recruited well under Al Golden. They recruited really well under Mark Richt. Recruited well under Manny Diaz. So it's not surprising. Like, there's a reason they call it the state of Miami, because you can just go out there and, basically throw your helmet out there, and people in the area are going to remember the nostalgia, the fog of the Orange Bowl and all that kind of stuff. So it's not that surprising. I want to see it happen on the field. And look, they could be really, really good, but I also could see a situation where maybe they've got a window that they got to capitalize on this nostalgia, or it's going to peter off. I don't know. Miami could be gangbusters, go back to being a national champion. But I don't know. Like, I just want to see it happen first. You got to herald the son of Miami, but I just got to see it to believe it.
Tyson gets in over on YouTube, says, I love where our O-line recruiting is going. Bob Sadler, Colin Sadler's dad, gets in and says, need to give Coach Caldwell props for what he's doing now. He absolutely makes families understand that Clemson is a family. He has a unique ability to convey what Clemson is all about. There isn't, and he says, sorry, the internet isn't good over in Inman. But I agree with him. I think, Al, when you look back, not having him leave the program completely was a good sign for Clemson. I mean, Dabo wants to keep his inner circle connected and still close to the team, and I think doing that was really a good job for him, for Coach Caldwell staying.
Sure, yeah, he did a good job here for a long time. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who wanted to give him, some crap near the end of his career about, getting old. We need some new blood in there, all that kind of stuff. But I got to tell you, I thought he did some good things. He was a really good guy to be around. He was a funny guy. If you ever listen to any of his interviews, they were hysterical. So he certainly knew how to relate to some kids. I think it's a good thing we got Austin in there, and he's going to kill it. He's already shown that on the recruiting trail. So it's going to be fun to watch him and what he does with the guys this season for sure, and in how he develops, offensive linemen a little bit differently. You can already see a difference in his philosophy with the kind of guys he's recruiting, these big time guys, these mammoths, and that you're going to have to, have a hard time moving. So it's already a little bit different, but it's just going to be interesting to see how he develops them differently on the field, how he coaches them up.